Get your hand off my behind.
Is that your behind?
It was devastating. But that fighting and that constant bickering and everything, we did hate each other and love each other and want to slap each other around.
If a single refusal could make your entire career disappear, would you dare to say no? Cybill Shepherd, the woman who once dazzled America with a beauty as radiant as southern sunshine, once stood before that very question. She spoke up, but Hollywood did not. After a dinner with a powerful man at CBS, everything began to vanish. Invitations, scripts, contracts, one by one. No one issued threats. No one offered explanations. She simply went from primetime royalty to someone no one mentioned anymore. And that was only the surface of a life filled with shadows. Behind it were love affairs no one dared to acknowledge, public statements that once rattled American television, and personal choices that Cybill herself would later call regrettable, but not mistakes. Now, she holds nothing back. In her memoir, Cybill Disobedience, she tells it all, unfiltered, unguarded. And if you ever thought you knew who Cybill Shepherd really was, think again. What does it cost a woman to say no to power? Early life. Cybill Lynn Shepherd was born in 1950 in Memphis, Tennessee, a conservative southern city where young girls were expected to be obedient, graceful, and proper. But Cybill was different. From a young age, she stood out with her bright blonde hair, fair skin, and bold eyes. But what truly set her apart wasn't her looks. It was how she lived. Cybill never waited around to be courted. She went after whoever she liked. She once skipped school to audition for a modeling job, smoked Prince Edward cigarettes with friends, cheated on her Latin exam, and laughed loudly in public. Behaviors that, in the Southern culture of the time, were deemed unladylike. But to Cybill, life was about being different, about standing out. At 16, she unexpectedly entered the Miss Teenage Memphis pageant, not by choice. Her cousin shoved the entry form into her hands and said, "Just sign it." She signed it half-heartedly, right in the middle of her rebellious teenage years. But then, she won. That victory brought Cybill to the national Miss Teenage America pageant, a major televised event with enticing prizes and dozens of perfect girls from across the country. Each contestant was chauffeured around in a turquoise Comet, ate dinner with discount coupons, rehearsed a group number about American cities, and performed a 2-minute talent act. Cybill brought a bass ukulele and sang "Michael, Row the Boat Ashore," a simple, stripped-down performance that contrasted starkly with her rivals' flashy routines. She didn't make the finals, but she was crowned Miss Congeniality, a side award, but the first clear sign that she was liked, yet not fully accepted. Backstage, whispers started to spread. People said she was too impulsive, that a Southern girl shouldn't laugh that loudly or walk as if the stage belonged to her. In the press, Cybill kept smiling and said, "This is the best thing that's ever happened to me." But years later, in her memoir, Cybill Disobedience, she admitted, "Not making the finals was deeply painful. It cemented my lifelong fear of not being perfect." At 17, Cybill had already learned something most people spend a lifetime grappling with. When you dare to be different, the first thing you get in return isn't admiration. It's scrutiny. And it was from that pageant that her life began to draw attention. And with it came all the complications. Early career. At 18, she went from a rebellious high school student in Memphis to the face of L'Oreal. Then one day, in the most unexpected place, a grocery store, director Peter Bogdanovich saw her on a magazine cover. One simple question: who is that girl? A few weeks later, Cybill was invited to audition for The Last Picture Show. She got the part. No one expected a model with zero acting experience to deliver one of the most iconic debuts in American cinema. As J.C. Farrow, the beautiful, cold, dangerously raw young woman, Cybill stripped down in the middle of a living room, shedding not just her clothes, but her innocence. She was 21. The film received 8 Oscar nominations, and Cybill's first performance earned her a Golden Globe nomination. From that moment on, Hollywood understood this wasn't a beauty to be neatly boxed in. This was a threat in bloom. But Cybill feared no judgment. She moved on to The Heartbreak Kid and then Taxi Driver. In Taxi Driver, her character Betsy appeared in just a few brief scenes, but it was enough to haunt Robert De Niro's Travis Bickle and all of America. Just as her fame was peaking, she did the unthinkable. She released a jazz album. No trend chasing, no flashy promotion, just Cybill singing Cole Porter, music meant for a select few. Her voice wasn't flawless, but it touched deeper than technique ever could. Music stayed with her throughout her acting career. In her later sitcom Cybill, she wove her love for singing into the character itself, not as a showcase, but as a quiet reminder. Behind the image of a rebellious movie star, there was still a place called peace. Career success. After her striking film debut, Cybill Shepherd continued to conquer Hollywood on instinct alone. But it wasn't until 1985 that she truly reached her peak, not on the big screen, but on television. Her role as Maddie Hayes in Moonlighting turned Cybill into the golden face of prime time, playing a bankrupt ex-model forced to co-run a detective agency with the cocky David Addison, Bruce Willis. She brought to life a female character who was intelligent, sharp, and alluring, without leaning on any man. Moonlighting quickly became a phenomenon, not just for its unconventional script, but for the electric tension between Cybill and Bruce. Humorous, sensual, and utterly unpredictable. The show earned Cybill 2 consecutive Golden Globes for Best Actress, 1986-1987. Episodes from Moonlighting are still taught in screenwriting classes for how they broke traditional television molds, from noir homages to musical numbers to characters breaking the fourth wall. Cybill wasn't just the lead actress. She helped shape the show's rapid-fire, witty dialogue and became its driving creative force. But when a woman reaches the top, the weight of bias follows closely. Tensions between Cybill and Bruce Willis, both strong-willed, neither backing down, soon spiraled out of control. Behind their on-screen chemistry were clashes, arguments, and cold stretches. When Cybill became pregnant with twins, the production schedule shifted. The media blamed her, though both stars were under immense pressure. As Bruce's fame exploded with Die Hard, the distance between them widened, both on and off screen. Moonlighting had once symbolized American television's creative renaissance. But by 1989, after several strained seasons, it was canceled. Cybill walked away with 2 major awards and a silent wound. She once said, "I don't regret the conflicts on Moonlighting. They made the screen feel real, but the price was steep." It was then Cybill understood, no spotlight comes without a shadow, and the brighter the light, the deeper the shadow. 10 years after Moonlighting, Cybill returned to television with something unprecedented, a sitcom named after herself, and one she controlled. Cybill, 1995, followed Cybill Sheridan, a middle-aged actress pushed to Hollywood's sidelines, now raising kids, auditioning for mother-in-law roles, and trying to retain her dignity in an industry obsessed with youth. This wasn't just a character, it was a declaration. It's me, but saying everything I once had to stay silent about. This time, Cybill wasn't just taking a role. She co-produced, had script control, and dictated the show's tone. And the result was immediate. Cybill became a sensation. For the first time, American television allowed a woman over 40 to openly talk about sex, ex-husbands, loneliness, and workplace injustice, without being filtered through artificial decency. The series earned Cybill her 3rd Golden Globe, and Christine Baranski, her razor-sharp sidekick, also won for her role. The show maintained solid ratings, remained in CBS's top 20 for its first 3 seasons, and was hailed by critics as the spiritual precursor to later series about older women like The Good Wife or Big Little Lies. But just as it hit its stride, Cybill was abruptly canceled. No explanation was ever given, and the truth behind the scenes was revolting. Though Moonlighting and Cybill marked the television peaks of Cybill Shepherd's career, she was never confined to just those 2 bright chapters. From the beginning, she had been a daring film actress, earning Hollywood's wary respect through The Heartbreak Kid and Taxi Driver. At the same time, she pursued music in her own unexpected way. Classic jazz, quiet, off-market, stripped down to an earthy voice and heartfelt emotion. By the 2000s, Cybill no longer occupied center stage, but she remained present through sharp, nuanced roles. The mother in The L Word, witty guest turns in Psych and Criminal Minds. At every stage, lead or supporting, screen or song, Cybill emerged as a voice impossible to mistake, unwilling to follow trends and unwilling to be forgotten. Personal life. Cybill Shepherd once stood beneath spotlights and applause. But long before the glory, she stood at a crossroads, a man or a role. John Bruno was the first name to pass through her life. A renowned restaurateur in New York, a connoisseur of wine, a Ferrari lover, elegant to his fingertips, and passionately devoted to classic cuisine. Their relationship unfolded like a movie, a different restaurant each night, from smoked salmon at the Colony to foie gras and duck à l'orange at Quo Vadis. But that sophistication soon became a slow-burning paradox. At the time, Cybill was modeling for glamour, the face of idealized beauty, yet she could barely sustain that image off the page. As soon as the Model of the Year contest ended, I began gaining weight, returning to the size I'd been before starving myself, she wrote. Bruno adored thinness, yet he was the one who dragged her from one lavish dinner to the next. Cybill jogged every morning, forced herself to lose weight, but what hurt most wasn't the food. It was the jabs about her thighs, her hips, from the man who claimed to love her, while ordering extra soufflé for dessert. I stuck my fingers down my throat twice after dinner, she admitted, but she couldn't keep doing it. Not because she was weak, but because it went against who she was. Then came the call, an audition for the Last Picture Show, the role of J.C. Farrow, a cunning, seductive girl, 2 nude scenes, a brilliant director, Peter Bogdanovich, a turning point, and 1 condition. Bruno laid it out plainly. If you do a nude scene, I will never marry you. The reason was nothing new. If the whole world sees my wife naked, I won't be interested in you anymore. But to Cybill, that threat didn't make her back down. It only solidified her choice. She never believed marriage was some reward for being obedient. To her, marriage was an unfair contract, where women were always expected to nod last. I never really cared about marrying John, or anyone, she wrote in her memoir. Marriage is a form of sanctioned slavery. Bruno didn't just try to control her life, but also the bedroom. Cybill recounted, if one wanted it, the other had to comply. There was no room for freedom, only ownership disguised as love. Ironically, it was Bruno's mother, Frances, who helped her see clearly. If you want to do this movie, then do the movie. Don't let Johnny hold you back. And Cybill listened, not to his mother, but to her own voice. She chose the role. The Last Picture Show made her a star overnight, but the price was her first love and her first lesson. When a woman dares to follow her own path, the first thing she might lose is the man who once promised to walk beside her forever. I don't need anyone to redeem me. I just want to live without being held back. From John Bruno, Cybill Shepherd learned what no classroom could teach. Freedom always has a price, and sometimes that price is your first love. From that moment on, she loved by instinct and came to accept a bitter truth. When a woman dares to choose her own path, The first thing to leave her isn't fear, and it's often the man walking beside her. By walking away from John Bruno to film the nude scenes in the Last Picture Show, Cybill Shepherd wasn't just leaving a man, she was shedding a skin. She stepped onto the set carrying more baggage than anyone could see. Rebellious youth, a hunger to be seen, and a loneliness no one at the time cared to name. Then she met Jeff Bridges. Jeff was the opposite of every man Cybill had known. No pressure, no control, no judgment or demands. Their closeness came naturally, like two tired souls finding each other in the suffocating quiet of a film crew stranded in the emptiness of rural Texas. Long nights returning to the motel, quiet evenings with no liquor, no noise, only a peace Cybill had never really known. Jeff didn't ask her to be thin. He didn't make cruel remarks about her hips or thighs. He didn't test her independence with petty conditions. At 21, he only knew how to give. And that, more than anything, confused her, because when you've grown used to chaos, kindness starts to feel suspicious. During the filming of A Steamy Kiss with Tim Bottoms, under scorching sun, surrounded by a whole town staring, it was Jeff who helped her forget all those eyes. He looked at her like a fellow actor, like a person. Not a poster, not a sex symbol everyone was trying to claim. But peaceful moments rarely last long, especially in Hollywood. Jeff left the set for a week for military service. And in that fragile gap, Cybill wasn't strong enough to hold herself steady. Peter Bogdanovich, brilliant director, much older, already married, stepped into her life with what seemed like an innocent line. "I guess you'll be alone tonight." She didn't deny it. She simply said, "I'm alone every night." A line that fell from her lips, part confession, part surrender. That night, she didn't call Jeff, didn't wait for him to return, didn't hold on to anything safe. That's Hollywood. The feeling of being seen by a legendary director, not your body, but your potential, your artist's soul, can easily be mistaken for love, especially when you're young, uncertain, and have just turned down a man who wanted to marry you. Cybill walked into that night, not out of love for Peter, but to prove to herself that she was worthy of being wanted by a genius. When Jeff came back, she told him everything. He said only one thing: be careful. No blame, no anger, just a parting word. And Cybill understood it as both a farewell and a warning. Jeff was kind, but she didn't choose kindness. She chose intensity. She chose the blaze, even knowing it came from a man with a wife and child. She had met Polly Platt, Peter's wife, the very woman who had recommended her for the role of Jacy. She had seen her holding their baby on set. But in Hollywood, where moral lines blur under stage lights, Cybill didn't find the courage to stop. Not because she didn't know right from wrong, but because she still believed. If a love burns brightly enough, it must be right, somehow. She was wrong. Jeff never blamed her, but Cybill blamed herself for many years afterward, because she had destroyed something gentle with her own hands, something she only learned to cherish much later in life. In her memoir, she wrote, "I've always been drawn to choices that leave me tangled, but the simple, gentle things, those are the first I tend to lose." She never got the chance to apologize to Jeff, and in Cybill's heart, that remained one of her most enduring regrets, the kind that teaches you. It was the right person at the wrong time. To Cybill, Peter had once been a hero, a filmmaker of great intellect, a man who had studied acting under Stella Adler, directed theater by the age of 20, and rubbed shoulders with legends like Orson Welles and John Ford. That almost arrogant confidence, he once claimed to compare himself only with directors like Renoir, Hitchcock, and Keaton, was precisely what pulled Cybill toward him like a magnet. To her, Peter had it all: power, protection, and a gaze that made her tremble when he whispered, "I don't know who I want to sleep with more, you or the character you're playing." Their affair began in secrecy, stolen dinners, emotionally charged days on set, and flared into something more when Cybill moved in with Peter at the Sunset Towers. But the foundation was never stable. Peter still went home every night to put his two young daughters to bed. Cybill didn't try to be their stepmother. She played croquet and parcheesi with them, took them swimming, waited for them to open up, only to have to return them to the real home. Looking back, Cybill admitted there was an unspoken rule in their relationship. Don't ask me things you don't want to know, and never lie to me in the same city. Peter might have been living with her, but legally he was still Polly Platt's husband, the production designer who had supported his career from the very beginning. Polly once told the press, "I had two small children and didn't know what to do. I loved Peter, and he loved Cybill." She discovered the affair by noticing a box of pralines, her husband's favorite candy, which he had never bought for her, sitting in their room, but not for her. In her memoir, Cybill confessed, "I didn't think I was cheating with Peter. How could I be cheating with someone I never really had?" The complexities only deepened when Peter hired Polly to work as production designer on What's Up, Doc? But with one condition: Cybill was banned from the set. Polly had famously quipped she refused to be Cybillized. Meanwhile, Cybill was cast out of the professional circle entirely, hearing secondhand stories about Barbra Streisand, distanced from every trace of the man she thought loved her openly. During those days, she would stand in front of the mirror and whisper to herself, "I look in the mirror and I don't know who I am. An actress, a lover, a homewrecker, or just some shadow he carved onto film?" That confusion wasn't just about her role. It was about not being able to tell where performance ended and reality began, where love stopped and possession began, where she ended and the version of herself he wanted began. Peter would often watch her from a distance, at pharmacies, at the movies, stepping in only when another man approached her, planting a possessive kiss as if to mark territory. To him, Cybill was a muse, a reward after a successful film. But to Cybill, the relationship felt like a chain, one that always left her feeling not enough, not safe, not legitimate. They never married, but Peter acted like a husband, sometimes a lover, sometimes a father figure. And for that very reason, one of Cybill's deepest regrets in life was that they never had a child together. The emptiness grew heavier when she had to watch Peter restart his family cycle with his ex-wife and children, while she remained on the outside looking in. Cybill recalled, "We loved each other, but it always felt like a love suspended in midair, never grounded. No promise of marriage, no wedding, no recognition, only waiting and fear." But this relationship was far from simple. They loved each other and hurt each other. While filming St. Jack in Singapore, Bogdanovich had an affair. Cybill came to visit, knew exactly what was happening, and stayed silent. On the other side, she was not faithful either. In her memoir, she listed them plainly: a waiter, an employee, and her co-star Charles Grodin. Her encounter with Grodin, as she described, never lasted until morning. They met while she was emotionally stuck with Peter. Charles Grodin entered her life like an evening companion, understanding, witty, and never asking for more than she was ready to give. "I didn't have to be too beautiful, too perfect, or too extraordinary around him," Cybill wrote. "Charles made me feel allowed to breathe." Neither of them called it a relationship. There was no talk of tomorrow. They saw each other, sometimes after a day on set, sometimes after a party, shared a drink, exchanged a few words, and perhaps shared a warm night together. But one thing was always certain: it wouldn't last until sunrise. "We never woke up together, not because we weren't close, but because we both knew. Some people only belong to the night, and that's all," she wrote. Charles Grodin didn't break Cybill's heart. On the contrary, he made her feel less empty, less forced to be strong, even if just for a few hours. In a world where men either possessed her or abandoned her, he was the only one who came and left, gently enough not to leave a scar. Not every man leaves you with pain. Some leave you with peace. And for me, that's sometimes even rarer than love, Cybill concluded that memory, with a quiet smile between the lines of her memoir. The cost of these relationships wasn't just a stalled career or a tarnished reputation. It was emotional depletion. In a world where women like her were allowed to exist only beside powerful men, as long as they didn't outshine or outrank them, Cybill once bitterly remarked, "I could be the muse, but I was never allowed to be the author." Peter later admitted he had broken every rule, cheating, smoking pot, something he once condemned, and letting emotions spiral out of control. In the end, when it all collapsed, Cybill walked away, carrying not just her heartbreak, but an unborn child and a memory she could never wash off. Because no matter how many men would come and go in her life, none would leave a mark as grand and as haunting as Peter Bogdanovich, the man who made her believe she was the center of the universe, only to cast her into its margins. In one of the most heartbreaking passages of her memoir, she wrote, "I woke up the morning after sleeping with him for the first time, and I waited. I waited for God to punish me, but nothing happened. And that's when I realized the price I would pay wasn't death. It was something far greater." Perhaps, in the world of powerful men, for a woman like Cybill Shepherd to be truly seen, she had to trade away not just her reputation, but herself. And that was the price of stepping into a marriage that was never hers to begin with. After walking away from Peter Bogdanovich, Cybill Shepherd didn't rush into a new relationship. She was clear about it. "I wasn't trying to run from Peter into another man's arms, but I needed to be touched, to be desired, to feel like a woman." It wasn't emotional need, it was an existential hunger. And it was in that moment that Elvis Presley, the musical legend now deep in his final years, surrounded by pills and isolation, entered her life like a beautiful, distorted mirage. To Cybill, Elvis wasn't just an artist. He was the first icon of her childhood memory. "I used to be insanely jealous when my sister had a record player and played Hound Dog non-stop. I'd scream just to drown her out." Growing up in Memphis, city of black blues and Sun Records, Cybill had seen Elvis as the man who borrowed and ignited everything he touched. But by 1972, his flame had dimmed under the rise of Motown and the British invasion. Still, he remained the king, at least in the subconscious of a Southern girl raised between soul music and the powerful shadow of whiteness. When Elvis invited her to a private movie screening, he'd rented out the entire theater. Cybill had one condition. He had to come pick me up himself. Part whim, part curiosity, but also a test of feminine power. Elvis agreed. That night, she and her best friend were greeted by the Memphis Mafia, his entourage. She smelled his signature cologne before she saw him. Let's call it Ode to Elvis. During the movie, when two men kissed on screen, Elvis abruptly stopped the film and left the theater, muttering, "See y'all later." To Cybill, it felt both awkward and loaded. But instead of questioning it, she went along. A few days later, he pulled up in a white Lincoln and brought her to Graceland. "I've been to many mansions," she recalled, but Graceland had its own kind of light, the glow of legend. They had lunch with Elvis's father, fried chicken steak, pastries, and wary stares from the bodyguards. The next night, she returned, this time a private dinner for two. She knew it wasn't love, but she wanted agency, she wanted control, she wanted to know what happened when you walked into legend and dared to break it. Elvis showed her around the mansion, ending the tour in his bedroom, faux leopard skin, mirrored ceilings, 4 televisions blaring in sync. He kissed her neck gently, undressed her piece by piece, and then suddenly froze. "What's wrong?" Cybill asked. Elvis hesitated. "Me and the guys, We've always said white men shouldn't, spoil women down there." Cybill was stunned, then burst out laughing. She could have been angry, but it was so absurd. It was tragicomic. "You have no idea what you're missing," she told him. "I've had men throw themselves at me just for that. Want me to show you how it's done?" The night with Elvis continued, but inside, Cybill felt completely detached, as if watching herself from the outside. She didn't love Elvis, and she didn't feel she was betraying Peter either. You can't betray someone you never really had. In her journal, she wrote, "Elvis's cluelessness made me feel more at ease than Peter's domination. I don't think Peter ever truly valued me, but being seen with him had a lot of prestige." Cybill concluded, "I had fun in Elvis's bed, but I couldn't sleep. He drove me home around midnight. My face was scratched from all the kissing. It wasn't love. It was a chapter of confusion, where youth, legend, and loneliness collided in a sleepless night. A night that felt like brushing up against history, but in the end, left her lost in the fog of fame, impulse, and a vague emptiness she couldn't name. I was with the man the world called king, and all I felt was hollow." After Elvis Presley, another brief affair swept through Cybill's life like a sudden craving, and vanished just as quickly. It was Don Johnson, then in his early 20s, not yet the icon of Miami Vice, but already radiating the seductive danger of a southern drifter. Long hair, provocative eyes, and that effortless charm that made every woman feel like the center of the universe. They met at an event in Los Angeles. No one remembered exactly. A premiere, an audition, maybe just a loud party of soon-to-be famous faces. What mattered was, Don was there, and Cybill was trying to forget Peter Bogdanovich, the man who left her loving and waiting in uncertainty. In her memoir, Cybill described Don with brutal simplicity. "He was like candy when you're starving, sweet, intense, and gone before you know it." She didn't romanticize anything. Between Cybill and Don, there was no love, no promises. Just a few nights of instinct, encounters full of breath and heat, no need for words. If Don saw her as a trophy to brag about, then Cybill, at that moment, was like a moth to flame, flinging herself into desire just to prove she could still be wanted. Still able to make men look up. In Don's nearly indifferent gaze, she didn't feel loved, but at least she was seen. Then one day, Don slept with the on-set hairdresser, and Cybill realized she was trying to punish Peter with her own pain. When Moonlighting began, Cybill and Bruce Willis had kissed off-screen. Their chemistry was so undeniable that everyone expected them to become a couple, but Bruce only confused her. Every time they shot a kissing scene, he'd shove a camel tongue down my throat, she said, as if trying to break the illusion on purpose. Cybill wasn't hurt, just bewildered, unsure where the acting ended and the reality began. Then Charles Grodin returned, like a gentle breeze. Not fiery, not overwhelming, but comforting. Like a nap after a storm. But that very safety made her indifferent. She left before sunrise, as if afraid she might get used to kindness. Robert De Niro didn't even give her a chance. When he found out she was on her period, he simply walked away. No words. Cybill didn't cry, just silence. A silence that stretched as long as the humiliation. With Jack Nicholson, she thought she was different. She felt special under his gaze, until she discovered she was just another name on the list of those brought home. It didn't feel like betrayal. It felt like waking up from a short dream, full of illusion and cigarette smoke. Jeff Goldblum was a resting stop. No impact, no aftershock. And with David Geffen, the famous music producer, and a gay man, Cybill tried out of curiosity. "We wanted to see what might happen," she wrote. "But no one got hurt. Just two lonely people in a night that had no definition. Each encounter was like a blade. None struck the same way. Some drew blood. Some left her numb. But none could ever heal the growing emptiness inside her. Cybill Shepherd didn't need someone to spend the night. That was true. What she needed more than anything was someone who would still linger in her mind the next morning. And no one ever did. But no one can outrun themselves forever. By the time Cybill entered her first marriage, she carried with her every scar that hadn't healed, from all those nights that led nowhere. After too many nights trading pieces of herself for mornings that never came, Cybill Shepherd began to consider something she had never taken seriously before: a family. No more fireworks, no more chaos, just a home, a child calling her mom, and someone who'd still be there when the sun came up. David Ford, a stage actor she'd met during the Peter years, became the first choice. They married in 1978, and their daughter, Clementine, was born in 1979. But Cybill would later describe the marriage as a technical stop between two wild chapters. Ford cheated. Not a tabloid scandal, but enough to show her that a family can't survive on one person's will alone. She filed for divorce in 1982 and won custody. Ford left behind $15,000 and a woman trying to believe she could be a mother without needing a man beside her. But the real blow came later. Once, in a dental clinic, Peter Bogdanovich ran into David Ford. Just a few minutes, no words. But when Peter's eyes landed on Cybill, he picked up a crystal ashtray and hurled it at the wall behind her. A cold, shattering sound. No one was hurt, but no one forgot. It wasn't just a random flare-up. It was the accumulation of every silent rage, every unspoken betrayal, from two men who had once loved her, and each left her broken. Her second marriage came during Moonlighting. Chronic back pain led her to a chiropractor, Bruce Oppenheim. In a small therapy room, he didn't just ease her pain, he made her feel heard for the first time in years. They married in 1987, while she was pregnant with twins, Cyrus and Ariel. No wedding, no honeymoon, no illusions. But marriage built only on tenderness and a strong spine wasn't enough. Before the twins turned 2, they separated. In 1994, Cybill tried again. Not with marriage, but by moving in with musician Robert Martin, who handled the music for her sitcom Cybill. They were together for 4 years. He loved her, but not the way she lived. Cybill believed in feminism, in free speech, in a woman's right to speak without asking permission. Martin did not. That relationship didn't end because someone failed, but because they stood on opposite ends of a world that love alone couldn't bridge. And then, there was no one else. In 2012, when Hollywood had long forgotten her name, Cybill quietly got engaged to a Serbian man named Andrej Nikolajevic, a former jeweler turned psychologist. But they never married. And when they broke up, she didn't go looking for someone new. She turned to God. In a 2016 interview, she said plainly, "I think I have a broken heart, and there's a part of it that can't be healed. That's when I turned to Jesus." But a broken heart wasn't the only thing that wouldn't heal. Because even when the affairs were over and faith became her new anchor, Cybill still had to face other wounds, ones inflicted by Hollywood itself. The very town that once crowned her an icon slowly eroded her reputation and her self-worth. Sometimes a comeback is also the first slip downward. Moonlighting brought Cybill Shepherd roaring back after a quiet spell, but it also exposed her darkest struggles and the darkest truths of American television. They called her a drama queen behind the scenes, always late, snapping at the crew, once causing a director to quit mid-production because he couldn't stand her commands. But whoever asked what was underneath? That behind that attitude stood a woman shooting 12-hour days, raising 3 small children, and lying flat on the floor during breaks to survive the stabbing pain in her spine. Cybill once said, "They thought I was difficult, They didn't think I was fighting my own body just to survive each day. But Hollywood is not patient, especially when your co-star, Bruce Willis, was skyrocketing after Die Hard. Between them, there had once been a spark. Sly glances perfectly timed, banter that made the screen sizzle. But off-screen, it was a silent war. Cybill refused to bow to men. Bruce refused to be outshone. They argued constantly. And when CBS found out she was pregnant with twins, they quietly saw it as the perfect excuse to start phasing her out of the spotlight. Moonlighting ended quietly. No farewell, no emotional send-off. Just one final episode, then gone from the schedule as if it had never existed. When asked later, Cybill simply said, "I wasn't fired. They just didn't call me back." But the hardest fall came afterward, when she poured herself into creating Cybill, a semi-autobiographical sitcom where she played herself, a middle-aged woman past her prime, juggling career, kids, and complicated men. The show was a hit. It won a Golden Globe, and then it was canceled, abruptly, without explanation. Cybill believed the reason was clear. The show dared to talk about feminism, homosexuality, abortion, topics unfit for CBS in the 1990s. One of the show's key executives was Les Moonves, the same man later exposed in the Me Too movement. Cybill once said bluntly, "I believe the show was canceled because I wouldn't sleep with him." No one confirmed it. No one denied it. But for Cybill, it was the first and last time she fully understood that in Hollywood, the truth doesn't always fit the script. After the controversy, Cybill slowly disappeared from the screen. They called her a has-been diva, an extreme feminist, a woman who had sabotaged her own career. But what no one said out loud was that maybe she simply didn't have the strength to keep fighting in a world where every nod had to be paid for with your body, and every protest marked you for erasure until the end of your career. As she entered the twilight of her life, Cybill Shepherd no longer lived by impulse or chased after emotions. She slowed down, quietly listening to her body, that body which now constantly sent out warnings she used to ignore. In 2001, she was diagnosed with a rare and aggressive form of skin cancer, dermatofibrosarcoma protuberans. The tumor was located on her back, and for 3 years of treatment, she kept it a secret. It wasn't until 2004, when she reached the 3-year remission mark, that she finally spoke up. "I will no longer have cancer come January if I make it past those 3 years." From that moment on, every emotional adventure came to a stop. Instead of following her heart, she learned to stay alert to every ache, every small change that might signal the next disaster. And disaster came. For nearly 20 years, Cybill had lived with undiagnosed irritable bowel syndrome, IBS. "I said I was in pain. They told me I was imagining it. They said it was all in my head," she recalled. In truth, she suffered from bloating, chronic constipation, and cramps so severe that each morning she had to try on multiple outfits, not knowing how swollen her belly might be. Only when she finally found a doctor who truly listened did she receive a proper diagnosis for the condition that had tormented her for 2 decades. Since then, Cybill became a spokesperson for the Great Women with Great Guts campaign, speaking openly about issues few dare to discuss. "I once asked a group of strangers at a party, 'So how's your menopause going?' Everyone froze. But I don't mind. We need to talk about these things." In 2007, a violent stomach episode left her crawling down the stairs with her hands to call for help. In the ambulance, she whispered, "I think I'm dying. I feel my soul leaving my body." 4 surgeries followed. She had to learn to walk again. Cybill had once been a symbol of ageless beauty. But it was illness, and the days spent flirting with death, that ultimately redefined her. No longer hiding behind the spotlight, she chose to live truthfully. "It's too late to start lying about my age now. And from that point forward, everything she wrote was real, raw, and sometimes cruel, just like the life she had lived. Legacy and influence. Cybill Shepherd was never the perfect role model. She was living proof of a different kind of legacy, not one built on glory, but on hard-earned lessons gathered after every collapse. She was once dubbed the Golden Globe Beauty Queen, and later she handed that same title to her daughter. A gesture that may have seemed light-hearted but carried deep meaning. Legacy can be passed down, even when fame cannot. Her career was never seamless, but Cybill never hid her failures. From scandals and illness to public mockery with Razzie Awards, she faced it all with a disarming frankness. If you want to play the lead, you have to accept the bad roles too. That line wasn't just about acting, it was about the way she lived. Cybill never tried to be a symbol, but through her raw, unfiltered life, she became something for others to look toward, especially those who've stumbled, and realize the courage to fall and get back up again is its own form of success. And maybe it's that very imperfection that makes her legacy linger the longest. Not what she gained, but what she lost, and what she learned because of it. Current life. At 75, Cybill Shepherd no longer acts, no longer walks red carpets. She lives alone in a modest house in Encino, Los Angeles. Quiet, simple, and free of spectacle. She takes morning walks, occasionally stops by the grocery store, wears no makeup, hides no age. In February 2025, she returned to the stage for a small performance at the Catalina Jazz Club, a rare appearance to remind the world she's still here. That same year, she took part in the 40th anniversary celebration of Moonlighting, not for nostalgia, but to say women on television once had a voice and still deserve to be heard. Cybill no longer accepts scripts. She doesn't try to build an inspirational persona online. Instead, she posts photos of her grandchildren, talks openly about illness, recounts the night in 2007 when a stomach attack nearly killed her, and shares her long battle with skin cancer since 2001. Hollywood has let her go, but she doesn't need it anymore. She lives as herself, no roles, no masks. And for those who have ever been pushed aside for daring to live honestly, she stands as proof. Blunt truth still has a place, even if it comes late. Cybill Shepherd was never a perfect role model. She loved the wrong men, lived unapologetically, and sacrificed her career to protect her freedom. From the spotlight to the shadows, she never hid who she was. At 75, she doesn't need to be remembered, only to live in truth. But what about you? To live authentically, to love boldly, to fall hard. Is it worth risking everything? If this story helped you understand and appreciate Cybill Shepherd more, don't forget to hit the like button to show your support. And be sure to subscribe to our channel so you won't miss the next story about the world's most unforgettable legends.